Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Ned Bellavance, Ned1313 on Twitter, and welcome to Terraform Tuesday. Today, we are going to be talking about Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, aka OCI. Yes, Oracle has a cloud. Haha. Let's get all the jokes out of the way ahead of time. I, like you, have been fairly skeptical about Oracle's attempts to build a public cloud, but when I think Zoom moved over to it, not entirely, but large portions of it moved over, kind of had to start taking it a little more seriously, right? There's still the big 3 or 4, depending on how you count it, but Oracle's putting up a fight and they're actually doing some interesting stuff. How do I know? I was a delegate at Cloud Field Day 10 and Oracle gave a presentation and they talked about like some pretty cool stuff, but they also acknowledged that their early versions of the cloud that they tried to build they weren't great, and they also have an image problem because they're part of Oracle. A few jokes were made about licensing and how Oracle is a company of lawyers that does a little engineering on the side. And then we kind of moved on from that because while it's fun to make fun of Oracle from time to time, it's not particularly productive. So we got past that. And then they did this whole presentation about how they use Terraform as their native resource manager infrastructure as code language. And if that sounds weird, I thought it sounded a little weird, and I'd heard like rumors of this in the past, but in this case, they're actually doing it. So that is what I want to cover today. Before I do that, hey, if you are enjoying this Terraform Tuesday stuff and you'd like to get it a week early, hey, you can do that by joining my Patreon. Yes, I have a Patreon. And if you do that, you not only get early access to the Terraform Tuesday videos, you also get a weekly newsletter. And who knows, I might throw some other stuff in there too. We'll see what happens. It starts at $2. $2 a month. So that is definitely within most people's reach. So if you'd like to do that and support me, you can do that on Patreon. Now, that's all I want to talk about when it comes to that. Let's move swiftly on to the topic of using Terraform with Oracle Cloud, OCI. All right, so I've laid down the basic premise, right? Oracle Cloud is a thing that exists, and if I had to give my opinion on what it's best for, if your goal is to consume infrastructure as a service without too much service layered on top of that, by which I mean a lot of the other major public cloud platforms have a platform as a service offering multiples, and they're very robust in the way that they manage that platform as a service. Oracle doesn't have that so much. They have a bunch of services, but they're mostly at the infrastructure level or the basic cloud building blocks level. And that's fine. If that's what you need to build your solution, you can go ahead and do that. If you want to use one of these more advanced platforms, something like App Service or something from AWS that's a managed service, like their Macy platform or something, go use it on that platform. It's fine. You can use more than one cloud. Multi-cloud is a thing. But if you don't need any of that and you want something that's a little cheaper, Oracle Cloud is actually a little cheaper than the other ones. So you certainly have that option. Now, the thing that piqued my interest, obviously, was the fact that for their resource manager, they use Terraform for IAC. And what does that actually mean, right? Because surely they're not using only Terraform for all of their scripting and everything they do in the Oracle Cloud. And that's true. That is not what's happening here. There's still an SDK, there's still an API, but there is also deep integration with Terraform. What do I mean by that? Well, let's go over to a view of the browser and dive in a little deeper on that. Okay, this is the Oracle Cloud console. And the feature that we're talking about here is called stacks. So let's go ahead and go to this resource manager link that we have here to create a stack. I'll just go ahead and click on that. Now, what does that actually mean? A stack, if you've ever used CloudFormation, a stack is just like a CloudFormation deployment, basically. And instead of using the CloudFormation YAML or JSON, you're submitting your configuration using Terraform. And the state of that deployment is using Terraform's state mechanism instead of whatever CloudFormation is using on its backend to detect drift and apply updates to the configuration. I'd like to say that Azure has something similar, and they kind of do with blueprints, but I'm going to be honest, I haven't been super impressed by that. I would just use Terraform if I wanted to do the same thing on Azure. Anyway, so there's a number of different ways you can move forward here. You can upload your own existing Terraform configuration. You can use a template that they've provided to you. You could pull it from a source control system, or if you have an existing compartment that has a stack in it, you could copy it over. Now, just a little terminology lesson here. When Oracle Cloud talks about compartments, it's very similar in nature to resource groups in Azure. So if you've worked in Azure, you'll feel somewhat comfortable. The main difference here is that compartments can be nested. So you have one root compartment, and then within that compartment, you can have nested compartments. So it's almost more like GCP's folders in a project, I think. It might be the closest analogy. And I think you can apply permissions to the various compartment levels. So you could give someone permissions to manage something in one compartment versus another. Some resources have to exist inside compartments. I'm not going to get that deep into it because I don't understand it that well. But what you need to know is the compartment is sort of the unit in which resources exist, and a stack is a resource. So verbiage lesson over. Getting back to Oracle Cloud. So if we wanted to, we could import from a source control system. We could use one of their existing templates. We've got a lot of options here. If we wanted to just use an existing template, we could click on change template here and just do something like a default VCN. A default VCN is their equivalent of a VCP or a VNet. If we select the template, now that template is selected, we can scroll down and give the stack a name, a description. We have to select a compartment in which to create this VCN. And then we have to select a Terraform version we want to run. Right now they're using .12, which is weird because .14 is out and I think .15 is about to drop, but whatever. And then you can add some tags. If you're all good on that, we can go ahead and click on next. Then we get to required configuration information. So these are the input variables for the stack. You're basically submitting variables for the Terraform configuration. So we can specify some information here, the CIDR for the VCN, a subnet that's going to be created, and then a VCN label. So those are all optional. The only thing you need to give is a display name. We can call this one, let's call it Taco Test, because that's what I want to call it. And then click on next here. And it will tell us some information about the stack before it provisions. And if we go ahead and click on create, now it's going to go out and deploy that stack. So let me hide this Cloud Shell here. We'll get back to the Cloud Shell in a moment. And we can see, here's the stack. Now, has it actually deployed anything? No. It's just created the stack for us. The next step in this process would be to run some Terraform actions that are run as jobs to get this stack deployed. So we can click on plan, and that's just going to run straight up Terraform plan. So we'll see the Terraform plan appear in the logs down below. We're currently looking at the job within this stack. Once that plan is complete, if we're happy with the output, we can do the standard 1, 2, 3 of doing a plan, doing an apply, and just checking for it. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward things a little bit so you can see what the result of the plan is. Okay, so the plan has completed successfully. If we scroll down the logs, we can see this is just standard Terraform output, right? We can scroll all the way down and see what things it's going to create for this VCN. And if we get down to the bottom, we can see it's going to add 6 things, 0 to change, 0 to destroy. If that looks good, we can go back to the stack details, go under Terraform Actions, and go ahead and click on Apply and set it to automatically approve, and it's going to create this VCN for us. Now, I don't want to do that. We can skip that portion of it because now we're going to do something a little bit different. Let's go back to our stacks. This part's kind of cool. We're going to create a new stack. But in this case, we are going to use source control to do that. So to set up the situation here, you can store a stack configuration, which is really just a Terraform configuration on GitHub or GitLab. And then you set up a source provider on the Oracle Cloud side that points it at your GitHub account or your GitLab account. Then when you want to create a new stack, you can point it at that source control provider, select the repository, the branch, and the directory where you have your Terraform configuration, and use that to create a stack. Now, it's not a CI/CD pipeline. It's not going to do all these actions for you once you have the connection built. But from there, it can import the configuration, and you can run plan and apply as you want. So I already have one of those configurations set up. If we go over to Visual Studio Code, I'll show you what I got going on. All right, so we are now in Visual Studio Code, and you can see in the left side, I've got this 2021-03-30 Oracle Cloud folder. That is when I started developing this thing. And we've got a GitHub folder. I'll expand that, and it's got a main.tf. So this is the configuration that I have stored up on GitHub. And you can go ahead and step through this with me if you want. Standard Terraform config. I've got my required providers. I've got my provider defined with a region, which is a requirement. And then I have a few variables. Now, my region and my prefix have a default, so I don't actually have to specify anything with that. But my parent compartment ID does not have a default, so you do have to submit a value along with that. And then scrolling down, what is it creating? It's going to create a compartment to hold some resources, and it's then going to create a VCN. And lastly, it could create a subnet. So that's what it's going to do. Now, before I do anything, I'm going to comment out this resource like this. So we'll go ahead and comment that out. There we go. And I'll save that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this change up to the GitHub repository. So when I do my initial stack creation, it is not going to create this subnet. And then we'll uncomment it, run a plan and apply to show that it's pulling the newest version from GitHub. So this is my basic configuration. Let's go back to the browser and walk through creating the stack. Now, I should say that you can do all of this from the CLI. You don't have to go through the console to do this, but I thought it'd be easier to show than just running some arcane commands in the console. All right, I've already configured a source provider. So all I have to do is hit the drop down here and pick my current configuration source provider, which I named Ned1313 because I am super creative. And then we have to select a repository within that. Now I know my repository is called Terraform Tuesday. And because I've done this before, that comes up right away. So I'll select that repository, and then my branch is, it's master right now. I've been meaning to rename this. And then finally, the working directory is going to be today's working directory. We're going to start with today with the 2021-03-30 Oracle Cloud and then select GitHub. So that's the directory in which we want to work. We can give it a name, but I'll just accept the default name. And then the Terraform version, for whatever reason, it offers .13 when you pull it from GitHub, but not when you use the template, which is super weird, but whatever. And that's it. All we have to do is click on next. And now it's going to ask us for the variable values that we want to use for our stack. And remember, the only one that we actually have to specify is the parent compartment ID. And if we bring back up the Cloud Shell that I was using, I ran a command that's included in the code that's in Visual Studio. I ran a command that queries what the parent compartment ID is. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy that value right now. It's not the sort of thing that you could remember easily. And we'll shrink that back up and paste it in here. There we go. That's my parent compartment ID. We're all set with that. We'll go ahead and click on next. We've got our stack information and we will select create. Now again, just a quick reminder, at this point, it hasn't actually deployed anything. It's just created the stack. Now we need to go ahead and run a Terraform action, which is a plan. So I'm going to go ahead and kick off a plan, and it should tell me that it's going to create a compartment and a VCN with some properties around that VCN. So I'll go ahead and let that run, and we'll fast forward to when the plan has completed. All right, our plan has completed successfully. If we scroll down a little bit, we can see it is creating a compartment for us. It is creating some standard objects that are part of the VCN. And if we scroll down to the bottom, we can see 5 things are being added. That all sounds good to me. What's the next thing we'll do? We'll go back to the stack details. We'll go under Terraform Actions and select Apply, automatically approve. It's going to go out and create those resources for us. Now, once again, I will fast forward this process so you don't have to wait for all these things to be created. Okay, it has successfully completed. That's exciting. If we scroll down, let's go down to the end and see Apply Complete. It created all of our resources. That's awesome. Now, if we go back to stack details, I want to point out a few other things that are available to us. For instance, under More Actions, we can run drift detection, and that basically runs a plan in the background and sees what the diff is between what's currently deployed and what should be deployed. That seems fairly useful. If we look under Terraform Actions, we can import an existing state if we have it. We can also destroy what's there. And that's pretty much all we have under here. Now, remember I said that I'd commented out that subnet. So let's go back to Visual Studio Code and uncomment that subnet. Okay, we're back in Visual Studio Code. I'm going to uncomment this subnet resource from the configuration. And it's simply adding an addition, well, there's no subnet there right now. It's simply adding a subnet. I'll go ahead and save that and add in a comment here and commit that and push it. So it's committed. Go ahead and push it. All right, so that change has now been pushed up to GitHub. Now, because this stack is linked to GitHub, we should simply be able to run another plan and apply, and the new subnet will be added. Let's go back to the console. All right, we're back in the console, and I'm going to go ahead and run a Terraform plan. And I'm going to verify that it grabs the latest version of the code from GitHub. So we'll go ahead and run a plan here and just validate that it actually plans to add the additional subnet. So it is running now. I'm going to go ahead and fast forward to when it finishes. Okay, it has succeeded. So let's go ahead and scroll down and see what it's planning to do. And we can see it's planning to add a subnet. That's exactly what we would expect. So it did grab the latest code. And if I want to apply that config, I can go back to stack details over here, go under Terraform Actions and click on Apply and click Apply here. And it's going to go ahead and add that subnet as a job. All right, and through the magic of video, I've fast forwarded to the part where it has successfully applied that additional subnet. You can see one thing has been added. That's awesome. What's interesting is if you look over in the resources, you can actually view the current state of our Terraform configuration. And that's interesting. What could you do with that state information? Well, I'm glad you asked. Now, what if you wanted to move off of this stack mechanism? Maybe you're adopting a different pipeline. Maybe you want to use a different backend. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of different reasons. You're not locked into using the stack mechanism at all. You can simply copy the state that I just showed you into the directory or whatever the backend destination is that you want to use, and then use the Terraform config you already have in source control pointing at that updated backend. That's all you need to do. It's all good. If you delete the stack itself, it doesn't actually delete the resources you have deployed. It simply deletes the stack. So we could copy this state, put it in a directory, and we'll put it in the directory that we have our Terraform config, save it in a file called terraform.tfstate. And if you run Terraform in it and then plan, it'll say no infrastructure changes needed because you're already up to date. So it's very cool. I've tested it. It absolutely works. If you wanted to do that, you can. Let's go back to the console. And we'll go back to the stack detail. And I just want to show this. If we go under here and say delete stack, it's going to tell us that all the resources persist after stack deletion. If you don't want that, you can run a Terraform destroy before you delete the stack. Otherwise, those resources just keep on living on. Now, we don't necessarily want to do that. What I actually want to do is run a destroy action and get rid of these resources because I don't need them anymore. And that'll do it for today's Terraform Tuesday. I leave it as an exercise to you to take that state file and bring it down to your Visual Studio Code directory. So let me just show this real quick. If we go under the directories, I have one in here that's called basic. This is basically the exact same configuration and I have a terraform.tf vars file right there for you. All you need to do is copy that state and then paste it into a file in this directory called terraform.tf state. And then you can run Terraform init and Terraform plan, and it should say nothing needs to change. I mean, you need to change this parent compartment ID, but I'm going to leave that as a challenge for you to do. It's using the built-in authentication from the Oracle CLI, so you're going to have to install the Oracle CLI as well, and that can take a little while. It uses Python just like the AWS CLI does, but for whatever reason, it seems to run slower. I don't know. Anyway, so that is an example of how Oracle is leveraging Terraform for its resource manager. And I just thought it was really cool that they've just gone full on native with that. And for me, it makes it that much easier if I want to use Terraform with Oracle because I know it's a first-class citizen. Whenever they develop a new resource for Oracle Cloud, it's immediately going to have Terraform support because they rely on it so heavily. And I just thought, that's pretty cool. So hopefully you found it interesting. Hey, quick reminder, if you are finding this stuff interesting, you can also support me on Patreon. If that's not your thing, please subscribe to the channel. I really do appreciate that. You don't have to hit that notification button. That I find that thing super annoying. So just feel free to skip that. If you don't mind liking the video, apparently that helps with engagement or something. I don't know. If you're interested in getting more Ned in the cloud of some kind, I just want to let you know I do have a daily podcast. It's about 10 minutes every day on a subject of my choosing. You never know what it's going to be, but hopefully I make it relatively interesting. And I also have a podcast with my buddy Ethan Banks that is called Day 2 Cloud. So if that's of interest, there are links down in the description. That's going to do it for me for today. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, stay healthy, stay safe out there. Bye for now.